But it's a slippery slope and it can go downhill really quickly. So if your kids are used to being on screens and then you're running around everywhere and life is super busy, there ends up being no time for them to just sit and to be bored and to be kids and to be creative. And we have to make an effort to give that back to them. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Build Good Humans. My name is BJ Knights, your host. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you may notice that there is conspicuously a second chair lacking today and also a second human that's not here today. Typically, this podcast is going to be set up as an interview style, but every once in a while, like by design today, but also probably not by design at times in the future, you'll be stuck with me. And I will do my best to give you some thoughts and insights into parenting, into life, and ultimately probably just some dumb stories about life and what's going on right now. But today, specifically, since we're still fairly new in the podcast, we're only into episode 3, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about myself, where I'm coming from, why I started the podcast, and we'll take a few minutes at the end, too, to talk about busyness and what that's doing to us on, I think, a personal level, on a family level, and then maybe, in all of my wisdom, on a societal level. And we'll see where that takes us. All right, so I promised to keep it to the abridged version, but I do want to give you a little bit of background about myself, especially if you are new to me. We're all new to this podcast at this point, but my name is BJ Knights. I live in Massachusetts with my family. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4. I've got 3 boys and a girl, ages 10 and under, which means our house is crazy all the time. I am a practicing Catholic. My faith is important to me. I also have a science background. I have a biology degree. I'm a lifelong musician and actually have worked in music most of my life. I've taught guitar for, probably upwards of 15 years. I lived in Nashville for a number of years, touring as a professional musician, a sideman, playing guitar and bass for a number of artists, and currently live back in Massachusetts with my family. My impetus or desire to get this podcast rolling, first and foremost, is I am a fan of the format. I just enjoy podcasts. I feel like it's a great way to share information, share wisdom, share thoughts and insights about obviously any number of different topics. But especially at this point in my life, for me, the one thing that really is the pinnacle and of most importance is my family and raising my kids. And as much as I still enjoy playing music or being active, playing sports or running or lifting weights, I have plenty of things that I enjoy doing in life. Everything these days is through the lens of a parent and how what I do affects my own kids, affects children around me, whether it's when I was teaching guitar, whether it's friends and their children, people that I get to see on a regular basis. It's one of those things that I've found that as a parent, you just start to see the world differently. And it's not something that I put on intentionally or something that I started doing because I felt the need to. It just, in a positive way, kind of became my world and part of my identity. There's a quote about anybody can father a child, but it takes more to be a dad or a mom for that matter. And I do think there's some credence to that. And it's important for me to show up every day in a meaningful way for my wife, for my kids, and then beyond that, for those around me, for students, for friends, for family, for people who I come across in my daily life. So the podcast is called Build Good Humans, and that's certainly a little bit of an audacious title. I definitely get that. And I loved the name. It just kind of came to me out of nowhere, and I sat on it for quite a while. But I was also a little hesitant to title the podcast that because I am by no means an expert. I have a lot of experience, but I'm not a doctor. I don't have a master's in education or in psychology. I just have a lot of hands-on experience with kids of all different ages, and certainly with 4 of my own. And I care. That's a big, big piece of it, is that I want to raise kids that are respectful. I want to raise kids that care about the people around them. And certainly they're first and foremost their family and their immediate friends, but the world around them at a greater scale. So in starting the podcast, I really just wanted to share ideas and ideally sit down with guests who are smarter and more experienced than me, and at the very least have different experiences from me that we can share with each other, that we can share with the world through the podcast, and hopefully just get some positive parenting, coaching, teaching, mentoring advice out that, heck, if it helps one person and it guides one person in the right direction, we're doing a good thing. So that was my ultimate goal with starting this podcast. And I enjoy the medium as a consumer, as someone who's sitting and listening to it. But I also enjoy the art of putting together a podcast. That's something, and the whole creative side of things. These days in my own life, I'm not playing as much music as I was in the past. I still perform fairly regularly, but I'm not touring. I'm not on the road, and I have a day job now, which is strange for us musicians. But I work basically a 9 to 5, an 8 to 4 kind of gig during the day. I play music, so I play solo acoustic shows, I play guitar and bass for a wedding band, an event band, a corporate kind of gig. In fact, I'm off to a gig in Boston tonight right after this. I do photography and videography work. So to some degree, it never ends, but that's a positive thing. These are things that I've worked into my own life that I enjoy doing. And then I hope to use some of those skills to share some of this with others along the way. As far as my own background, again, like I said, my name is BJ Knights. I grew up in Mansfield, Massachusetts, and ultimately had a pretty normal and positive life, a typical 80s and 90s American upbringing, and that's a good thing. That's not a knock by any stretch. I have fond memories of my childhood growing up. My parents split, so they got divorced when I was 10 years old. But they were both a huge part of my life still, both my mom and my dad. And to this day, I have great relationships with both of them. So while that's something I had to navigate growing up, they were great parents, both in their own right. And I am thankful that they were such a big part of my life then and still to this day. So that's I've been blessed to have great family in my life. So growing up, I had kind of 3 areas of my life, 3 circles on the Venn diagram that don't overlap a whole lot. But I did fairly well academically. So I was a big math guy. I always enjoyed math growing up. Kind of ripped through our math curriculum pretty quickly as a kid, even into high school. I loved guitar, metal, and I listened to that. I had my mullet going and everything that you would expect from a late 80s, early 90s heavy metal loving kid. And then I played soccer, and I absolutely loved soccer. I always laugh because I think it was my senior year of high school. I was the captain of the soccer team. the captain of the math team, and I played guitar in like a hard rock band. And again, that's definitely three circles of the Venn diagram that have like almost zero overlap. So to say I wouldn't even say I was an unusual kid. I just had a few unusual talents and passions that didn't overlap. So I had a few different friend groups that didn't necessarily overlap either. But that's cool. It was a good thing. So I had my music, I had academics. I did fairly well in school. I played soccer through high school, right up into college, actually. But when I went off to college, not too long, I think my freshman or sophomore year, I quickly found out that you could get paid to teach people how to play guitar. And I was like, oh man, let's do that. In hindsight, I might have talked myself into continuing with college and doing that, but you end up in a good spot, and I ended up where I'm supposed to be. So from there, I taught guitar for nearly 15 years. Some other things happen along the way, but I won't bore you with all those. But yeah, I spent many years playing guitar, teaching, playing in local bands around Boston and Providence. In my 30s, I moved down to Nashville with my wife and our first son. This is when I only had one child. We lived there for a couple of years. I enjoyed that immensely, playing music in town, but also primarily being on the road. So I was living in Nashville, but most weekends playing gigs all over the country, really, at that point, all over the Southeast. But gosh, Colorado, Alaska, playing with many different artists, many different bands. So that was a lot of fun. As we had more children, naturally, it got to be tougher and tougher to be on the road. So we moved the family back up to Massachusetts, continued to teach a bit, picked up the day job, which is a weird thing for a musician, but it's a good gig. And to this day, I still perform, I still teach, I do photo work, I do video work, kind of runs the gamut. So I'm lucky that I have a number of things in my life that I enjoy, that are creative outlets, that are things that I still have some passion for, and they're things that I can do for fun, but also to make money at the same time and help support the family. So those have all been blessings for me, and it gives you a little bit of a background on where I'm coming from. To go back to something I said earlier, starting a podcast called Build Good Humans feels like a pretty audacious goal. And by no means do I think that I have the answers. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. The goal of the podcast is to get as many people on here who have more knowledge, more wisdom, better insight than I do, and to share that with the world. So the idea is we're going to try to keep this format, when it's just me talking at you, to a minimum. We'll do them from time to time, and I'll try to keep them hopefully insightful and not terribly boring along the way. But my goal and what I truly enjoy is highlighting others and bringing other people to you that I think have really unique backgrounds, really unique insights, like I said, on parenting, step parenting, teaching, mentoring, anything involved or regarding bringing up the next generation. So that will be kind of the game plan for the podcast moving forward. Episode 1 was Josh Adler. We spent some time talking about step parenting. Josh is a stepdad of 2 children, and just a great person all around. So episode 1 was kind of focused around step parenting and the challenges and the joy that comes from it. Episode 2 was my oldest son, Caleb, which was a blast to shoot. It was actually his idea. I was talking about people that were coming up on the podcast, and he said, well, why don't you have me on there? I was like, you know what, man? You're absolutely right. So that one was a lot of, it was funny. It was heartwarming. It was a lot of good things. But I really, I've enjoyed sitting down with both of those guys so far. And I have a list of a number of people that I know are going to come with some great thoughts and insights and challenges for you over the next few weeks, few months, over the next year. So please definitely stay tuned in. If you do enjoy what you're hearing, subscribe on whichever podcast forum you use. Subscribe on YouTube, follow along there. Please share it with other people if you dig it. That would certainly be helpful for me as we build up a little bit. And as I realize, as we're moving on here, I'm going to have to get going to a gig in Boston fairly soon. I want to kind of brings up our last topic, or the last thing I want to talk about today, and that is busyness. I have this very strange internal battle because I believe I'm actually a very hard worker, and I am kind of going all the time on a million different projects. Like I said, doing the podcast, and I do photography work, and I play music gigs on a regular basis, and I have a day job, and I'm a husband, and I'm a father of 4, and there's so many things that I'm doing and that I enjoy doing, but it is busy, to say the least. And I certainly don't say that asking for sympathy. I've done that to myself. But it gets to be a lot. And I often wonder where to draw the line, where to rein it in. And generally speaking, I find that I get a little too busy, and then the boat rocks and life gets a little bit out of control. And then I go, oh man, it's killing me. We gotta back off. And so I stop booking as many gigs. I stopped doing as many things. And then over a couple of weeks, over a month or two, it kind of flows back the other direction. And then I go, okay, cool. We're in a little bit of a better place. I'm around. I could breathe a little bit. I'm not running from one thing to the next all the time. And I could spend a little extra time with the family. And then so I go, okay, cool. But oh man, maybe we need a little extra income. So I'll take this gig and then I'll book this gig. But it's a balancing act. And I think anyone watching, whatever your situation is, I'm sure you can relate to that. All areas of life are a little bit of a balancing act. But for me, staying active, being a hard worker, but also picking and choosing the spots to work and to be active, it can be difficult. As a parent, my wife works. She's had a great corporate gig for many years, 10 plus years at this point. I was a touring musician. I've worked as a music teacher. I currently have, like I said, a more typical day job, but I really work 2 or even 3 jobs. It's not 3 full-time jobs by any stretch, but it is 1 full-time job, and then photography, and then music on top of that. And if I want to, I can, thankfully, gig 2 to 3 nights a week, which ends up being 10, 12, 15 in a month on top of working a regular job and on top of spending time with family and being present at home. So you can see how it kind of compounds quickly and can get out of control if you don't get ahead of it and if you don't make the right choices. I don't necessarily, well, not even necessarily, I know I don't have the answer, but I do find that keeping myself in check, and I think it was Rich Roll actually who talks about this kind of concept that there's no such thing as balance throughout life all the time, in the sense that we don't just live a balanced life where we nail everything and we're right in the middle and we have just enough time with family and just enough time at work. His approach is that it's more about seasons. So you might have a crazy season of life where if you're an athlete, you're training all the time, or if you're a musician, you might be on the road or you might be playing multiple gigs. For me, it's often in the summer. So in the summer, it's only a couple months long, but there might be 20, 30 gigs in that 10-month stretch or 10-week stretch. Whereas other times of the year, if I want to back off, I can take a few weeks off and not gig at all. So his approach to balance is one where he kind of sees it as a balance in seasons in life. So there may be a really busy season, and then you come down into a season that you can relax a little bit, you can catch your breath, and again, be more present with family, with friends, with your life from day to day. But the quote that always comes to my mind, I think I get bonus podcaster points if I use some cool, obscure quote. It's not that obscure, but I think it was Blaise Pascal who said something along the lines of, all of humanity's problems come from the inability to sit in a room quietly alone. And that one always gets me because I'm going, man, you're absolutely right. And then I think about it and go, you know what? I can. I must be doing all right. I can get in a room by myself and I enjoy the quiet and I enjoy a little bit of that peace. And then I think about it and I say, well, do I actually? I mean, I certainly enjoy a few minutes to myself, no doubt about that. But the moment I really am in a room quietly by myself, I go, man, like, what can I get caught up on? What do I have to do next? Oh, I have to edit all these photos for, that's due next week. Or I've got this gig coming up, man. I got to learn a couple songs by tonight. Like, I should do that. We haven't planned meals for the week, or we haven't gone shopping lately. The fridge is empty. Maybe I can go do that now. So very quickly it can spiral and get crazy. And in my head, I'm going, I like this quiet time. I enjoy this quiet time. And I do, I appreciate it. But I'm so busy during the week that when I have that quiet time, I find that my mind is continuously going and it's on to one thing and the next. And can I get ahead of it? And can I think about this? Do I have everything planned out right? And I'm not saying that that's inherently a bad thing. It's good to have a plan. It's good to have an approach. But I know how easy it is to get caught up in that. So it's just one of those things where I try to be mindful of it. I try and not book myself out like crazy. But I think probably like all of us, I find that when I'm working a lot, maybe making a little bit of extra money, helping out the family in that way, I feel like I'm not here enough and I'm not present for my wife, for my kids. But then on the flip side, when I am home and I am present for them and I'm not taking on extra gigs or taking on, bringing in extra income at any given time, after a couple of weeks, I start to go, man, like, oh, we could really use that income. We could really use some extra help, or I should really be out there doing this. So I think it's an internal battle that we all struggle with. And I don't think it's terrible in and of itself. But what I do think is that we can get very caught up in being busy for what feels like the sake of being busy. And it doesn't even necessarily mean we're getting stuff done all the time. It's just we're running from one place to the next. And we're, this time of year, we're taking care of gifts for Christmas or for the holidays. And we are running one kid here and running another kid here. And the reason I talk about this, or the reason I wanted to bring it up a little bit, is because it certainly gets passed on to the next generation. I know that when I'm stressed, I know that when I am super busy, even if I'm putting on a smile and I'm being decent to my kids, that it certainly comes across. I know they feel a little bit of that tension, and at the very least, they're often, by necessity, running around with me. We're all in the car together. We're getting one kid from school, and we're going to the next kid's school, and then we're going to the supermarket, and then it's a lot. And as an adult, most of us can step back at some point and go, wow, this is too much. I gotta figure out a better plan and work towards it. As a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or however old your children are, they don't have that insight yet. And we're just kind of drilling it into them that that's life, that we just run and we run and we run and we go from this thing to the next thing and the next thing. And it's about getting stuff done. And I don't believe that we intentionally do that. I don't believe our goal is to show our kids how busy we can be, or, oh man, like, teach these kids to work, so we're going to do a million things. I think most of the time it's just a byproduct of we're trying to be good parents or be decent parents and give the kids opportunities that we think will help them to get into activities they enjoy, while at the same time working and taking care of what needs to be taken care of for the family. But I think it's very important that we keep in mind that that type of pace, it's not good for us as adults. It's certainly not good for children. And between if you allow your kids to use devices, or if they're on smartphones or iPads, or even in video games, though none of those things on their own are inherently bad or evil, but it's a slippery slope and it can go downhill really quickly. So if your kids are used to being on screens and then you're running around everywhere and life is super busy, there ends up being no time for them to just sit and to be bored and to be kids and to be creative. And we have to make an effort to give that back to them. It is extremely important. And that's truly why I wanted to share this today, because it's so easy for us as adults to fall into that pattern and to think we're doing well. And maybe in some cases we really are doing well. We're certainly giving it our best, and we're trying to take care of the family financially. We're trying to provide them opportunities and education and activities and fun and things that are genuine goods, or genuinely positive things. But we run the risk of getting caught up in that and then transferring that on to our children as a result. So as we wrap it up today, I would just simply say to keep that in mind. Maybe if you can find a half an hour or an hour in your day to truly step away from your job, step away from even your family for a few minutes, put a little bit of thought into what your day looks like, what your week looks like, what your kids' schedule looks like. And even if many of the things you were doing for them are good in and of themselves, take a look at the big picture and see if you've got them running around like crazy all the time. See if you're scheduling any time for them to just be kids and be bored and be creative and figure it out on their own. We don't give them that opportunity enough. And I think it's worth taking a little bit of time out of our own day, out of our own life, to see where we can give that back to them and offer it back to them. And it's not an immediate fix. It's not going to go away. In most cases, we can't stop working or work not quite as hard as we've been working, but maybe we can find a little bit more balance, and maybe we can pass on to them the value of that time together, the value of being present, the value of not having something to do every minute of every day. So toss that around a little bit this week. Do the best you can. Don't beat yourself up for it, but see what you can do for them. See where you can get them a little bit of time back in their life to just be kids and enjoy being kids. And I think it will have a positive impact, not only on them, but on you and on the entire family as a result. So I appreciate you hanging out with me. Appreciate you hanging out and listening to me babble on for an entire podcast today. But again, if you dig it, please subscribe on any of the podcast platforms, on YouTube. Share it with some friends, someone who could use some of that advice or some of those thoughts. And we'll see you next time around. All right. Have a good one.